Hello and welcome to Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV. I'm Phil Dave. Coming up,
the way in which a woman goes to the toilet, it's very unlikely that she can aim in a way that's going to make the outside of the toilet dirty.
God, I wish that were true.
Oh,
some of the
so
things
true.
I have seen. I don't want to go into the very gross details of this time of day, but
No, I'm sorry, I disagree with that. I think women's toilet habits are inevitably better.
I think I have just reached the peak of my broadcasting career. Cristo and his guest clash over toilets. That would be where my career is heading. Also,
and how they made their money is questionable, because when the USSR disappeared, a lot of people... Would you stop preening yourself while we're doing a serious program?
Well, they stole the Russian...
Stop that?
They stole the Russian
Ash.
asset.
from Russia to Brussia, Mr. Whale is somewhat busy explaining how Russian money in this country works, whilst Ash is, well, in some sort of distress of follicle nature. Plus,
going to end up in hospital statistically. They're not going to get ill statistically. So that leaves the main reason, your words, is to protect others.
Please, let me answer. The answer is as follows. We know what we know, and then there are unknowns.
all that and more on Clashes of the Week. But first, gender-neutral toilets. Or where I come from, toilets. There has been a bit of a ruckus in the West End, as one of the particular theatres there has caused an uproar by changing their facilities to be gender-neutral. Well, Cristo brought this up recently when he spoke with Felix Fern, who is the co-founder of the grassroots activism Trans Activism UK. The main issue has been that some female theatregoers have complained at the prospect of having to walk past a man at a urinal. Surely, we're all just going about our business, aren't we? Does it matter where it is? Well, one would assume it wouldn't go down very well if it was in the dress circle. Anyway, here's what happened.
Is there a fundamental problem here, in as much as I get that it's well intended and that a gender neutral toilet that's open to everyone, it solves the problem of those people who don't identify as male or female or a gender fluid or however they identify, feeling like they have their own space or feeling like they are part of a space. However, there are some people that don't want to share their toilets with different sex or genders. So doesn't it undermine those people who have a right to have their own toilet?
I mean, I suppose that would be what their concerns actually are. From my point of view, from the reading that I have done, there's no specific issue when it comes to gender neutral toilets. So it comes across that for a lot of people, it's a level of personal comfort. A lot of people don't have issues when they're on trains with single sex toilets or their own single sex facilities within their own homes. So I'm personally not too sure what the issue is. There have been studies done. There was one done by Cambridge. Cambridge in 2020 that showed that gender neutral toilets tend to be more efficient for people. So one of the benefits is women benefited from it a lot because they found that the waiting times were a lot quicker. Using them with children was a lot quicker. So the simulations they did show that generally gender neutral toilets are quite helpful for everyone, regardless of the trans issue.
And I understand that. I think the issue here is the fact that women are actually encountering those who present as men in the same toilet. I take what you're saying. If it's a toilet on a train, or if it was, as I've seen in some bars as well, that you have a line of individual toilets for one person at a time, I don't know if that many people have problems with that. It's the fact that everyone's in the same toilet together. So women are having to walk past men are walking past women might be queuing outside the cubicle while men are over there using a urinal. It's that's the problem. And surely you recognise, because I get it, I understand why some people who might present with different gender identities might need to be accounted for in some of this, but I completely understand why a woman might not want to walk past a man who's using a urinal to get to a loo.
Yeah, I totally get that. Personally, not everyone is going to agree with me on this, but personally, I don't actually see the point for urinals. To me, in an ideal world, all toilets would be gender neutral with private spaces, so everyone has a cubicle. I'm a trans man. I use men's toilets or disabled toilets because I'm also a wheelchair user. But before I was a wheelchair user, I'm not the biggest fan of walking past random men using urinals either. But at the same time, no one's looking. You don't see anything. And if you do, I'm a bit worried about anyone who's looking that closely, regardless of their sex. No one should be gawking at men at urinals.
No, I mean, I think I mean, look, I'm with you. I think a urinal is a horrible invention. I even think the word is absolutely horrible. It's just such a horrible word, urinal. It's just such a horrible, horrible word. I don't like them because of the splashback as well. I don't know whether sometimes when you, maybe I'm going into too much detail, but also though, there is the argument, isn't there, that, and I don't want to be sexist here, but I might be, in as much as some men aren't particularly nice in some of their toilet habits. If I've ever been so desperate, or I've been in a gay club or something like that, and I've used the ladies' toilets accompanied, and you sort of get a gay pass sometimes to do that, they have been a million times nicer and cleaner, and they smell nicer and they're fresher than the men's loo. And so isn't there that argument that some women, it's fair to say, even if there were just a load of cubicles with no urinals, a lot of women don't want to use a loo after a man because some men's aim isn't brilliant, some men's aim on the floor isn't brilliant.
I wish I'd had your experiences of women's toilets. So I started transition like over 13 years ago. So I've had that weird perspective of having to use both men's, women's, gender neutral, disabled toilets. I've used every toilet under the sun. I wish I could say and like endorse this idea that women's toilets, these wonderful, clean, magical places, but some women's toilets are the absolute worst I have ever seen. So in my opinion, men and women are just as bad as each other. So I can totally get the idea.
I completely disagree with that. Women can't. The way in which a woman goes to the toilet, it's very unlikely that she can aim in a way that's going to make the outside of the toilet dirty.
God, I wish that were true.
Oh,
some of the
so
things
true.
I have seen. I don't want to go into the very gross details of this time of day, but
no, I'm sorry. I disagree with that. I think women's toilet habits are inevitably better. Isn't there also, though, an argument to say that women, because there's a lot of people who discuss this at the moment, talking about women's safe spaces, women wanting to feel safe in certain spaces, wanting to know that when they go into a woman's toilet, they are not going to encounter someone who has male body parts, right? Isn't that fair and reasonable that women should expect that? Because I'm not saying that someone who is trans by any means might be an aggressor. I think that's highly unlikely. But there will be, unfortunately, some men who will take advantage of the fact that there might be different gender identities in that toilet, and that is a legitimate thing for women to be scared about.
So that's kind of a multi-nuanced issue. There's a few different issues there that, to me, explain why it's not a big safeguarding issue, though I can absolutely empathize and understand why some people do think that way. So on the one hand, you simply cannot tell if someone is trans. There are people who, like butch-presenting cis women, who have been accosted in public toilets for looking masculine. There was a lady on Twitter who posted earlier this month about the fact that she was using a train toilet in the women's toilets, and a man went after her and started banging on the door and shouting at her to come out because she was in the wrong toilet because she looked masculine. That, to me, is far scarier to women using toilets.
But isn't that as a result
of
the fears around self-ID? And if self-ID didn't exist, then those fears wouldn't be out there.
Well, no, because trans people have been using the gendered spaces that are appropriate to them for decades. It's something that has come up and has become a big talking point, especially in online spaces, that I think has boiled up fear. Someone plants an idea of this scary thing, like the idea of people saying, well, it's not trans people we're worried about, it's men pretending to be trans going into spaces. For one thing, we have no evidence that that's a big thing that's happening. And also,
but it has happened. There have been cases of people who present physically as men who claim that their gender identity is female, who do so in a sinister way in order to get access to women's prisons, in order to get access so that they have for sinister intentions. Now, I take what you're saying, that there isn't, it's not common every single day, but it has happened.
What is far more common statistically is the amount of cis men that are a danger to people everywhere. Statistically, the vast majority of people who do cause crimes and violent actions, especially against women, are cis men. So how are we going to protect them in everyday life? We can't say, well, there's a few bad things that have happened with these bad eggs, therefore we must put these new special measures in place that may end up harming everyone overall, when no one's saying, well, what about men in general? What would your plan be to segregate women from men? Because if you're going by things that have happened and actual crime cases, surely that's far scarier than a few bad trans people.
Well, I think that the issue is, though, that women are being expected to be able to... Well, there's all sorts to this, and you're quite right when you say it's really nuanced and there's a lot to it. Women have had to deal with the male body parts being a tool of repression for them for centuries. I think that's a fair comment to make. And so I think that there is an issue here about perception of safety. And I take what you say. I think that it's a fair point to say that it doesn't always translate into the statistics around how safe they are. But I don't think that makes a difference to women who have had real worries about perception of safety, especially when you consider women who might then sort of be catcalled walking along the street, women who face men who might be trying to talk to them all day of the week. And I think there is a perception that, fine, I could go into a loo, it's some respite from all of that. Now, not all men are like that. Lots of men are lovely, but I think that is the perception that women have. And so I think the fear is that this idea then that there might be someone who presents as male in front of them in that space, that they then have to say, oh, I have to be accepting of this because that person might identify as a woman, or that person therefore might need to be accepted in this space. I think there lies the problem, because it's about the perception that a woman, based on decades, centuries of history, needs that area that is just hers.
I think the perception is a very good word to use in these circumstances, because it's something that changes with time, and the things that we see as different and therefore potentially unsafe changes. Do you know how toilets became segregated, male and female?
No, tell me.
So late 1800s is around the time that women started to get into the workplace. There was far more textile manufacturing. Suddenly, men's only spaces were not for men anymore. And the reason that women segregated toilets came about, before that, most people, especially in the US, used the same toilets. The reason that they were changed is because women were seen as less than. Women weren't just different physically, it wasn't just a genital thing, but women's minds were seen as less than. They were seen as hysterical, they were weak, and therefore they should be in a separate place. They should not be using the same privileged places that men should be using. So all of the toilet segregation has come from a place of misogyny or difference. If you then go on, there's been more toilet segregation. There's been black and white segregation. There's been gay segregation after World War II, going all the way decades into the 80s, of gay men being treated as unsafe.
And I take what you're saying, that, okay, the intent behind them might have been about some negative segregation, but if the result has been that women have felt safer as a result of it, well, then that's still the result that has come of it.
That's only now, though. Women haven't always felt safe as a result of segregation. You can't say, well, we did this bad thing, but eventually people felt okay. You can't say, well, let's segregate trans people. They might feel bad about it now, but maybe one day they'll get used to it and that'll become society. If you keep segregating people, how far are you going to go? Who are you going to segregate next? Who gets to say, this is the person I find unsafe and scary? Who gets to say that?
Because I'll go back to it. If I was a woman, you know, if I think about my niece, and look, I get it. I understand those people with different gender identities. There needs to be a solution found to this. I absolutely understand that. But when I think about my young niece, I would worry about her going into a toilet when she's young and encountering someone who looks like a fully grown man. I would, because not everyone's nice. But doesn't mean that they're trans. It's actually nothing to do in my mind with someone being trans, because I think, as you rightfully point out, the aggressors in most of these situations are going to be men born as men, biologically men. But I feel genuinely uncomfortable with the idea of saying to a younger person, a more vulnerable person, you can go into a toilet, and if you see a man in there with a big stocky man with a beard, it's fine. And I don't know how we're ever going to get away from that.
Well, some women grow facial hair. Some women have hormonal balances that result in that. Some women, like that butch woman, get perceived to be a man. So who is protecting them? Who is judging who is male and female?
Well, I think it's a third loo. I think the way in which you saw that is a third loo.
Okay, so third toilets is an interesting one. Like, I know some people are like, okay, cool, let's have male, female, gender neutral, problem sorted. Do you know what changing places is?
No.
So Changing Places is a toilet program for disabled toilets, specifically bigger, more accessible disabled toilets, because some aren't good for more severe physical or autistic needs. So it's something the government has been putting into place to get new toilets, right? They've put £30 million into this endeavor to get new, bigger toilets, not only in new buildings, but in existing buildings to fix problems that are already there, right? It took 15 years to get 1,260 toilets. The new endeavour is costing £30 million.
No, I understand that the point. So sorry, we've got to get to a break. But I understand the point you're making, that if that took that long, the thought of getting a third toilet is going to take forever.
Things I never thought I would discuss on any programme of mine. I personally have no issue whatsoever with urinals, and things staying the way they are, quite frankly. Might I suggest that most places have disabled facilities? So if you really are that twitchy at the prospect of using either male or female specified toilets, then simply use the space that is technically not allocated to a certain gender. Now, with respect, you're the one who has the issue. Don't put that on the rest of us. And might I remind you as well that there is currently a war going on in parts of Europe right now, and you're worried about where you go about your business. Seriously? Let's put it into perspective, shall we? And that's before we've even got onto the subject of respecting others' sexual privacy. There is nothing to say that there won't be a bad egg once in a while, and I'm sorry to be blunt, they could of course easily be quite perverted in their behaviour. But to be fair, I should stress that that conversation did take place before Russia made their attack on the Ukraine. Right, still to come.
And how they made their money is questionable, because when the USSR disappeared, a lot of people... Would you stop preening yourself while we're doing a serious programme?
Well, they stole the Russian...
Stop that?
They stole the Russian assets.
That and more after this. This is Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV with me, Phil Dave. Time for a quick clash now. Regrettably, one thing that war does is to highlight further the differences among the human race. Now this week, James Whale and Ash opened the phone lines to discuss how we should react to the actions of President Putin. Well, Richard in Kent was rather keen to question where the Russian money in the UK stems from, and whether it had a legitimate path to our shores. Mr. Whale, on the other hand...
So let's go to Richard. He's also in Kent. We could take over as the main radio station in Kent. Yeah. Richard.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ash. I always enjoy the satirical content that you both provide on your show. It always makes me chuckle. But I found Cormac. Is it Cormac this evening?
Yep.
The diplomat guy. I found him quite funny with his assessment and the omissions that he made with regard to, well, firstly, when he was talking about these Russian crooks that have come over and they've got billions and billions and billions of pounds in the bank. We should go after them and freeze their assets.
Though they've not only come over here, and he was saying, they're in America, they're in other parts of
mainly
Europe, they're
here.
all over the place.
They're mainly here. We welcome them, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We've got loads of them in London. Yeah. So what I would do, I would find out. I would have a look at the Foreign Office and the Conservative Party, and have a look at all the people that facilitated these so-called crooks that come in. I mean, we all know they were crooks, but a few years ago it was okay having all these crooks in the country. Whose palms they were greasing would be very interesting, and I think you've got Tory MP coming on the show a bit later on. So I would like somebody to have a look at what their relationship is with our government and our Foreign Office and our civil service, and find out who actually bedded them in and looked after their money for them and made sure they got a nice warm welcome. Because I think
you've got no idea, have you, how life works? You've got no idea what you're talking about. If you really thought that would be so easy to find out if that happened, I can't tell you. And I think you'll find quite a lot of them were welcomed in by the Blair government, the Brown government, and various other. They didn't come in as crooks. They came in as business people with a lot of money.
Really?
And how they made their money is questionable, because when the USSR disappeared, a lot of people... Would you stop
All the
preening
assets-
yourself while we're doing a serious programme?
Well, they stole the
Can you
Russian.
stop that?
They stole the Russian
Ash.
assets.
Stop combing your hair like
James,
It's
James,
elite capture. It's the same elite capture. They give money to the elite.
Are
And
you seriously going to tell your audience that none of these people entered under a Conservative government? I'm not a Labourite.
No, Richard, I'm not going to say that at all. But Richard, you know, you're talking rubbish. You
No, I'm
for
not
some
talking
reason.
rubbish. We have
No,
a- we
Richard,
have a
you
secret
are.
service.
Richard,
We have a secret
you
service
are.
that's supposed to know about these people.
Richard,
So
you're
these
talking
people
rubbish,
come in
mate.
And
And people like you who
People like
actually
me,
do
what?
this. Shut up. Oh, cut him
People
off.
like
I'm not
me.
going to have him
Very-
babbling on. Get rid of him. I'm not having people like that on when we are on the brink of a war. You know,
no, but
people
he's
who
right, isn't he?
actually...
I mean, a lot of crooks come over here with their money and they
Yeah, sure,
laundered their
but
money.
that doesn't really help the situation now to try and slag off the government.
Well, no, just
who
cut
are
them off.
trying to
Cut them
defend
all
it.
off and freeze their assets. Like
Yeah,
they've done
exactly.
with it. But
Every
do it to a lot
single
of
one.
them. Do it to all of them.
Take
not
their
just,
money.
Yeah.
Do you know, there is a line from a Roald Dahl book that says, nobody ever got rich being honest. And as much as I would love to think that that is not true, I fear it does apply to an awful lot of individuals. Let me stress, though, not all of them. However, as James quite rightly points out there, if the money is already in the system, what good would it do to expel it now? I believe the best way that one can get back at Russia is for the world to turn its back on them. How, I hear you ask? Well, we stop exporting goods to them for starters, and I know you'd say that they'll just go elsewhere, but not if it was a global effort to sanction and cut them off. This needs to be resolved without diving into battle, any more so than already has been done. But after 2 years of battling an invisible enemy, who the heck wants to start fighting a visual one? There's little doubt in my mind that if the world leaders pull together and come down heavy, then they can put a stop to this. But I'm concerned that what we're witnessing is disjointed thinking, from Biden offering his prayers, thanks for that, I'm a religious chap, but even I know I think it will take a little more than that, to Boris punishing 3 wealthy businessmen, to Ursula von der Leyen pretending that anyone still listens to the EU. We're on the brink of World War III, or at least that's what it feels like, and our so-called leaders are flip-flopping all over the place. Get a grip already.